Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom, I'm David Mensa, Israeli government spokesman. Questions in the chat, please, and we'll get to each one after a very quick update from me. It's Thursday, the 12th of September, day 342 of the October 7th war. To start with, very sad news of a fallen soldier, an Israeli soldier. IDF casualties since the start of this war have unfortunately risen to 709. First Sergeant Jerry Gideon Hangal was 24 years old and from Nof Hagalil. Jerry was killed yesterday when a Palestinian terrorist killed him with his tanker near Bet El. So again, as our president said yesterday, it's a difficult and painful moment in our country as one of our beloved dear sons have fallen in defense of our homeland, leaving behind families whose worlds are shattered in an instant. The achievements of our military campaign are many, but this war has exacted a heavy price. Our hearts are with the bereaved families. Our fighters are operating boldly and bravely to bring back the hostages and eliminate the terrorist threat to our people, whether in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, or on our northern border. May his memory be a blessing forever. Next, an update from COGAT and their work coordinating aid into Gaza. As of our latest figures released today, we have broken through the 1 million ton mark, and 1,010,000 tons of humanitarian aid have been delivered into Gaza on 51,000 trucks since the start of this war. You can get all the details of Israel's humanitarian efforts on COGAT's website. Hamas wanted a famine, Israel prevented one. Hamas wanted a polio outbreak, and once again, Israel acted to prevent one, initiating a massive vaccination campaign in partnership with the World Health Organization and UNICEF. So that's the end of our briefing today. I will now take your questions. Please put them in the chat together with your news outlet. Okay, first question here is from Jody Cohen of World is One News. What's the latest on hostage release negotiations? Thank you very much for that question, Jody. In the last few moments, just before we came on air, the Prime Minister's office said that Hamas are trying to hide the fact that they are continuing to oppose the hostage release deal and they are preventing it from materializing. Let me repeat that because it's quite important. In the last few moments, the Prime Minister's office has said that Hamas is trying to hide the fact that it continues to oppose the hostage release deal and prevents it from materializing. While Israel, on the other hand, have accepted the US final bridging proposal of August 16th, 2024, Hamas have rejected it. And what's even worse, they murdered 6 hostages in cold blood. Now the world must demand that Hamas release the hostages immediately. The negotiations for a hostage release deal are ongoing, they continue, and they are based on the principles presented by the United States in a manner that will enable the return of the hostages while achieving the other goals of this war. Israel appreciates the efforts of the US and the mediators to dissuade Hamas from its continuous refusal. Next question here is also from Jody Cohen at World is One News in India. What's your response to the Gaza Civil Defense Office, which issues casualty figures in Gaza? For example, it reduced the toll of a recent strike from 40 to 20. Thank you for that question, Jody. Let me share with you our thoughts on this Gaza Civil Defense Office, as you asked. Look, Israel is complying fully with international law in our just war against the murderous terror organization that performed these genocidal acts and crimes against humanity. All the experts in the world, all the military experts in urban warfare, they say the same thing. They say no other in the army, no other army in the world takes the trouble we take, goes to the extent that we go to, or does the things that we do to get Gazans out of harm's way. Hamas sees harm caused to civilians as a strategy. They are systematically violating international law and committing a war crime by using civilian infrastructure and the population of Gaza as a human shield for its terrorist activities. Now, in this case that you're asking about, the IDF and our Air Force conducted a precise strike on terrorists who were operating inside a Hamas command and control center in the area of Nusrat in central Gaza. This command and control center was embedded inside a compound that previously served as the Al-Juni school. Now, when a school is no longer a school and becomes a Hamas command and control center used by Hamas terrorists to plan and execute terrorist attacks against our troops and against our people here in the State of Israel, then it becomes a legitimate target. A school being used for terror purposes, according to humanitarian law, according to the Geneva Convention, is a school no more. Now, prior to this strike, numerous steps were taken to mitigate harm to civilians, precise munitions, aerial surveillance, and additional intelligence. This is a further example, just one more in a long list, of Hamas terrorist organization systematic abuse of civilian infrastructure in violation of international law. Now, the IDF will continue to operate against Hamas in defense of our people here in Israel. Now, as for Gaza's Civil Defense Office, we've seen this quoted without any caveat in many news media. I've seen it in CNN, I've seen it on the BBC. Now, this is important. No information leaves Gaza without it being cleared by Hamas. Nothing. I cannot think of another case in the world where a terrorist organization that gives information to media is then reported without caveat as fact. Not in Afghanistan and the Taliban or anywhere else. So I hope that makes the situation clear regarding our point of view. Next question here is from, if you could just scroll down for a second. There we go. I believe it's from, just scroll down for a second. There we go. It's from Phoenix Television in Hong Kong. We saw the GPO, that's the government press office, revoke Al Jazeera GPO cards. Could you please make some examples that journalists of Al Jazeera against the law of Israel? Thank you for that question. It's an important question from Phoenix TV in Hong Kong, China. Let me share with you our current thoughts. Again, this story just broke. We just released a statement from the government as we were coming on air. So let me share with you some of the details on this, because they are quite significant. On Al Jazeera journalists, the government press office is revoking the GPO cards, the government press office cards of Al Jazeera journalists working in Israel, following the unanimous democratic government decision in May to shut down the channel in Israel and prohibit its broadcast. Now, GPO director Nitzan Chen said, and I quote, "This is a media outlet that disseminates false content, which includes incitement against Israelis and Jews and constitutes a threat to IDF soldiers." Now, we're not the first country to take action in our region, so therefore the use of GPO cards in the course of the journalist's work could in itself jeopardize state security at this time of military emergency, end quote. So the revocation of these GPO cards will be subject to a hearing and will include Al Jazeera journalists and broadcasters in Hebrew and Arabic, but will not include the channel's producers and photographers. The revocation will be valid for as long as the Knesset, our parliament, legislation and the temporary order are in force. I would just add to that point from our government press office that, it was Hamas themselves that gave Al Jazeera an award for the best broadcaster. Hamas, a terrorist organization in this country, but in democracies around the world, they gave an award to Al Jazeera for being their favorite broadcasting company. I don't think there's anything more left to be said. Okay, can you just scroll up to the top? I think there's some questions. Okay, David Clement from the News Forum in Canada. Does the PMO have comment on Gal Hirsch's comments that he's proposed offering Yahya Sinwar safe passage out of Gaza in exchange for the 101 hostages? Thank you for that question, David. As you know, Gal Hirsch is heading up our negotiations team. He has made those comments in international media. I would refer you to those comments to get further information from them. Our objective in this war, our three objectives in this war are, as you know, firstly, to bring home our hostages. We will do anything to bring home our hostages. Number two is to ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to this country. And number three, of course, to make sure that Hamas does not run Gaza, either its governing structure or its military structure. Our position on that has been made clear very often. We've said these things many times. We want to get our people home, and we will do whatever is necessary to bring our people home. It's outrageous that 101 people are still being held by Hamas. They are women, they are the elderly, they are two children, for heaven's sake, the Bivas children. They need to be brought home right now. I would just remind you, while we're on this subject of bringing our people home, that what has worked in the past when it comes to Hamas, I just want to remind you of Alan Johnston, who was a BBC journalist who was kidnapped in Gaza on the 12th of March 2007 by the terrorist group, the Army of Islam. He's still at the BBC. I've seen him very often. He was released. How was he released? After 4 months in captivity. Our hostages have been there for more than 11 months now. Now, Alan Johnston, the BBC journalist, he was released after a huge international campaign, which led, after 4 months, which led to his release. Now, the tremendous amount of pressure which was put on this terror organization, Hamas eventually released him. As the Prime Minister just said, and I just read out his statement, which was just from a couple of moments before we came on air, the international community needs to do more, as much as possible. So the countries around the world need to do more to put pressure on Hamas to get our people out. This war would be over instantaneously if we got our people home, 101 of them. Some of them are dead, but many are still alive. And Hamas laid down its arms. This war would be over immediately. We want a better future for our people, for our children. We want to get our people home, but of course we want a better future for Gazans as well. And a better future for Gazans will begin when Hamas no longer has any power in Gaza. Next question here from Paul Adams from the BBC. The IDF said this morning that Israel had requested from UNRWA a list of its staff members killed in the attack on the school in Nusrat. The UN says it has received no such request. Can you clarify? Can you share with us the names of the significant numbers of Hamas operatives you say were killed in the strike? Let me read that out again, Paul. The IDF said this morning that Israel had requested from UNRWA a list of its staff members killed in the attack on the school in Nusrat. The UN says it has received no such request. Can you clarify and can you share with us the names of the significant number of Hamas terrorists you say were killed in the strike? So, Paul, thank you for that question. A couple of things I will share with you. Firstly, it is the BBC that used this morning on the front page of your website, the BBC that calls the Gaza Defence or Civil Defence Office. It quotes them without a caveat, without a caveat, without a caveat that they are reporting from the Hamas regime where almost no information comes without being cleared by Hamas. Later on in the article, there is a line saying the Hamas controlled Civil Defence Office, but in the first few lines, it just says Civil Defence Office. So I've referred you to those comments. Now, when it comes to UNRWA, let me share with you our current thoughts on UNRWA, because this is very, very significant. And of course, Israel always releases the names of the terrorists we target and we go for. It's our duty to target these terrorists. We have a duty mandated by our people to protect this country, and that's precisely what we're doing. Now, on UNRWA in particular, because you're asking me about UNRWA, just last month, in the night of the 5th and the 6th of August, we saw some stunning admissions hidden in the last line of an anonymous press release. The UN's Office for Internal Oversight Services proved that Israel's assertions about the involvement of UNRWA employees in the October 7th massacre are true. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because their internal investigation shows that 9 UNRWA employees took part in the October 7th massacre. Now, for 11 months now, UNRWA has denied this on the media, in writing. It has not told the truth. This has been literally dragged out of them. 11 months on, it's an achievement that they have admitted these people were involved in the massacres, but it's an achievement for the truth just for those small amounts of people, but it's only the beginning. Now, our forces here in Israel have retrieved millions of documents, literally millions of documents in captured enemy material. This intelligence has exposed 2 undeniable facts, Paul. First, the involvement of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, employees in the October 7th massacre, now confirmed. Second, the deep and systemic infiltration by these terror organizations, Hamas, but also Palestinian Islamic Jihad, into the ranks of UNRWA. Philip Lazzarini, UNRWA's Commissioner General, has given evidence of the UNRWA, has been given evidence. We've given him evidence of the UNRWA-Hamas nexus. It is literally impossible not to see this cooperation. Now, for 11 months now, Mr. Lazzarini has repeated the claim that Israel has not shared with him information about UNRWA and Hamas. He's lied, and now it's clear. UNRWA is not a force for good in Gaza. UNRWA works hand in hand with Hamas. The Hamas server farm underneath UNRWA HQ, the UNRWA employees who took part in the October 7th massacre, the Hamas tunnels under UNRWA-run schools, Hamas terrorists using UNRWA schools as shelters, the UNRWA employees that took hostages into their homes. Indeed, Israel has named 100 employees of UNRWA who are members of Hamas. They must all be fired. Now, this is just a fraction of the true number of UNRWA workers also in Hamas. So this is a test case for the future of the United Nations. Paul, we say this loud and clear. Israel calls on countries not to transfer funds to UNRWA, as funds will likely support terror. The fact that the UN organization was infiltrated by a terrorist organization should be of concern to all humanitarians. UNRWA are worse than useless. They're useless at aid distribution. They are useless at education. Israel sees no future for UNRWA in Gaza after the war ends. The fact that the UN remains silent about this is really a matter of huge concern. And it should be a matter of concern for the countries around the world donating their hard-earned taxpayers' money to this fraudulent organization. Now, this is a very important part I want to add to the end of this answer, Paul. I know it's been a long answer, but this is extremely important. Yes, we call on the world to support valid humanitarian organizations in Gaza. They are the real backbone of the humanitarian effort. So yes, of course, Gazans deserve a better future. They do deserve aid. We've facilitated more than 1 million tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza. But UNRWA is a front for Hamas. I hope that answers your question. Okay, I think there was a question up above which I missed. There was a question up above which I missed. Yeah, there we go. There's a question from James Marlowe. Question from James Marlowe there. It was reported the IDF discovered a letter written by Khan Yunis Hamas commander Rafai Salameh that was addressed to Hamas leader Sinwar and his brother Mohammed, in which he described the difficult situation after losing 90 to 95% of rocket capabilities, some 60% of personal weapons, 65 to 70% of anti-tank launchers, and most importantly, lost at least 50% of fighters who've been killed or wounded. It was reported the IDF discovered the letter written by former Khan Yunis commander Rafah Salameh and was addressed to Hamas leader. Okay, that's, you've repeated that part of the question. If this is true, are Gazans now turning against their Hamas leadership, and how much longer will it take to clear Gaza of its military capability? Thank you for that question, Joel. You're right, our Defence Minister shared the details of that letter yesterday in the media. You can find it on the Defence Minister's on the Telegram feed of the IDF, but also the Defence Minister's put this out in public. He's absolutely right, of course. We have made massive strides when it comes to defeating Hamas in Gaza, but the job is not done yet, because although there has been some brave Gazans that have stood up and spoken up against Hamas, they do not feel free to do that, because when they have done that, Hamas have either shot them in the legs, put them in hospital, just like a gangster terrorist organization that they are, or even worse, murdered them. Now, Gazans will not be free to be able to speak their mind until this organization is demolished. We have made huge strides in destroying this organization. Of their 24 battalions, almost all of them have been shattered. What's left now is a guerrilla force. I've seen some reports from the IDF of their continuing to face battles with Hamas, but they are not in the numbers which they were at one time. But Gazans will not be able to feel safe to be able to speak their mind until this organization is crushed. Getting rid of Sinwar is, of course, important in that role, to remove that fear element, to allow Gazans to have a better future. Look, the demilitarization and the de-radicalization of Gaza are absolutely key. The Prime Minister has made that absolutely clear. He spoke about this at length in his press conferences last week, an hour-long press conferences in English and in Hebrew. And for further comment, you can probably find it. You can definitely find it there from the Prime Minister. We've made huge strides of advance in getting rid of this terrorist organization, and with God's help, we will continue the job to be able to provide a better future for all the people in this region. Okay, let me just check. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think there was a question from Joel Pollock at the end. Yeah, there we go, Joel Pollock at the end. Question and another couple of questions. Okay. Joel Pollock, Breitbart News. Is there a consensus in Israel that Israel is preparing for war against Hezbollah given recent operations in Syria? Thank you for that question, Joel. Let me share with you the current situation regarding Lebanon and our north, and this also gives me the opportunity to share with you the very latest figures that we have regarding the situation in our north. We have received 8,000 rockets from Hezbollah in the north. 8,000. Can you imagine any other country receiving 8,000 rockets and drones from their northern neighbor and just accepting it? We've had 63.5 thousand people displaced. There have been 838 fire incidences. close to 200,000 dunams of burnt land, 46 people killed by Hezbollah, 24 civilians, which includes one Indian national and 21 of our military. There have been 294 people injured, 141 civilians, and 153 of our armed forces. Now look, the incessant firing of rockets and UAVs by Hezbollah, but it's a terrorist organization. We know what the purpose is. It's to kill our people, to impose terror and disruption on our daily life. But Israel is responding with force to aggression by Hezbollah, and we will use all means necessary, whether diplomatically or militarily, to restore security to our northern border. We would always prefer a diplomatic resolution, of course, but we have the military ready and able to deal with this task on our northern border. We must return safely our citizens to their homes. Now, we're going to respond with force to this unprovoked aggression of Hezbollah, which since October 2023 has launched these 8,000 rockets over our border. And that's not including the rockets which they have fired and the UAVs which they have fired and have landed inside Lebanon, causing fires and damage to their own people. Now, we believe that the state of Lebanon and Hezbollah terrorist organization, which we know, of course, operates under the guidance of Iran, are fully responsible for this escalation of the security situation in our north. And of course, we know as well that it's in violation of international law and UN Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701. Right, next question here is from David Isaac from JNS. Has the government proposed any plans for a replacement of UNRWA, UNHCR or other body? Thank you for that question, David. For the real expert opinion on that and for the reality of what's going on, can I suggest, David, that you contact COGAT? They are the real experts and deal with humanitarian aid going into Gaza and its effectiveness. Every single day they do a valiant job. I can't think of any other country that while an enemy is firing rockets, mortars, carrying out terrorist organizations, Israel has continued to push aid to try and reach ordinary Gazans. I cannot think of any other country that has done that. We've done that because it's the right thing to do. We've done that because we have no problem with ordinary Gazans. We're trying to get to this Hamas organization to defeat them for a better future for all of Gazans and of course for Israelis as well. Paul Adams, follow-up question. I'm familiar with your case against UNRWA. Paul, you never report it. But I'm afraid you didn't answer my question. The UN has said it's not received a request for the names of its personnel killed in Nusrat. The IDF says it has sent a request. Can you clarify? Thank you, Paul. That's a perfectly fair question. I would suggest I've given you a very comprehensive answer on the situation with UNRWA. We've said very, very clearly that it's a front for Hamas. It's fact. It's no longer, conjecture. These are facts. They are a front for Hamas. They actively participated in this organization, in the Hamas terror assault, and they continue. UNRWA facilities are continually used by Hamas. This Nusrat case is a prime example. And this Gaza Defense Organization never talks about the number of terrorists killed. They never ever mention any of the terrorists which have been targeted and eliminated. If you want more information, you said the IDF hasn't received a request. Can I recommend you contact the IDF, who will be able to answer you specifically on that question. Okay, I think that is the last question. Are there any other questions we haven't taken? No, I think that was the last question. No, I think we've taken that question. We've taken Paul Adams's question. Okay, so that was the last question. Thank you for joining us, everyone. The next briefing will be on Monday at 3:30 p.m. Jerusalem time. Please do stay safe, and in the meantime, thank you very much. Bye bye.